All right, everybody, welcome and thank you for your patience as we sorted out some technical difficulties on our end. We are here from the CDFI Fund on the Financial Strategies and Research team to talk to you all in brief about some frequently asked questions and content related to the full-length TLR today. My name is Erin St. Peter. I'm a research analyst on the Financial Strategies and Research team at the CDFI Fund, and I'm joined by Alicia Washington, also a research analyst on our team at the CDFI Fund. And we're really excited to be talking to you all today and to hear and field any questions you may have at this time. I'm also joined by several other colleagues at the CDFI Fund who may or may not participate depending on the content of these questions. So we're going to try to keep today's conversation focused on the TLR that is, submitted for our FA, RRP, and ERP award recipients. We know that a lot of that content will cross into some certification questions, but for today, we're going to try to keep things focused on the TLR and the TLR components itself. Thank you all for tuning in. We really, really appreciate it. At the very end of this call, we'll make some room for questions, and we would appreciate it if you'll wait until the end to field those questions. We'll do it over audio if possible, and if we get close to the end and need to put some questions into the chat, we'll make sure to do that so we can and not miss anybody who has a question today, and we can follow up afterwards. So this is just our brief agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about the instructions and resources that we have made available on our website around the TLR. We're going to talk a little bit about what is new this year, knowing that a lot of that is also explained in our guidance materials and sometimes better explained in some of our videos. We're going to touch on some FAQs and reminders, and then we're going to open up the bulk of today's session for our Q&A. We do have 2 hours scheduled for this call, so we may not use that full time, but we do have plenty of time to be here and to field questions that you have. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Alicia to do our next slide and to point us to some of the places where you can find the newest and most up-to-date resources on the TLR.
Thank you, Erin, for the introduction. For the instructions and resources, you may find the TLR data point guidance, instructional videos, and submission guidance at the cdfi.gov site. And then you scroll to the bottom of the page and you will see a title saying Compliance and Performance Reporting Resources. Also, you may go directly to cdfi.gov AMIS reporting. Also, there is a certification-related resources provided at the www.cdfi.gov Programs, Training, and Certification. And there is just step-by-step resources with screenshots on information for certification. And also on YouTube, there is a TLR submission video provided just by selecting this hyperlink information below.
Thanks, Alicia, for pointing us to those resources. We'll also make sure to put the link to this to the step-by-step submission video in the chat. One of our other colleagues might be able to do that right now while we're talking. That's posted on our certification page in the webinar section. That's going to show you how to navigate the new submission process. It's great. Our colleague Mike Snacky put that together for us. And so there's a mix of resources here that are on the standard compliance and performing reporting resources page where our full-length, sort of our awardee TLR resources were posted historically, but also new resources that pertain to the certification application and their use of TLR data are also located on our certification page. These slides will be provided on our website following this presentation, so no need to grab the links directly. So as everyone probably knows who's on this call, there are some things that are new this year in the TLR. And we're going to touch on those items in brief. We're happy to expand upon them in the chat as much as we can. And also, of course, happy to field any questions that come in on these newer elements via service request. So on a high level, folks who've been working on their TLR submissions or reading some of the updated on the TLR guidance will have noticed that There's some new language describing the TLR that's starting to use terms like full-length TLR and abbreviated TLR. We wanted to make it very clear for FA and ERP and RRP recipients that have active assistance agreements and reporting schedules with TLR elements, that those folks will be using what we call now the full-length TLR for their submissions. It looks very similar to the TLR you submitted in the past, but we're using it we're going to use that term going forward to differentiate between the TLR that's submitted by awardees and the TLR that's more abbreviated and submitted by folks who are not submitting TLR data under those award programs. So again, folks who've been kind of staying up to date with some of the changes will know and will have heard of the fact that the TLR data is going to be used in the CDFI certification application starting in FY23. So FA and ERP and RRP recipients, the transaction level data that is submitted for the TLR reporting obligations will be pulled into and used in the certification application. In order for that to work, we had to add some new variables to the TLR and to the consumer loan template in order for that data to be used properly, to be able to be captured in the sort of target market assessments that are part of the certification application. So if you were to open up the new templates that are live on the website for the full-length TLR, for the consumer loan template, you would see these additional data points. So for example, you would see a new data point called designated target market type in the full-length TLR. That would allow you to designate a transaction to a particular target market. And so that's a new variable that was added that's specifically going to help pull in your data into the CDFI certification application. There are similar variables that are added to the consumer loan report to do functionally the same thing as that which is available at the loan level report in the TLR. There are a couple of other things around which transactions get reported in the TLR that deviates from the prior precedent with this data. So in the past, CDFIs who were submitting TLR data as part of their FA RRP reporting obligations were explicitly told to exclude transactions relating to the Capital Magnet Fund program in their TLR submission. That's in part because the CMF program has their own separate submission process for compliance. New Markets similarly has a separate TLR. And so those were always reported separately historically. However, going forward, because our TLR data is starting to be used for certification review processes, we need to see that fuller snapshot of total annual transaction volume. And so for FY23 data submissions, we are going to be needing folks to include CMF transactions in their submissions and select New Markets transactions. We're going to be releasing information on exactly how that's defined. We can provide it in this call if folks have questions, but that is a deviation from prior submissions to keep an eye on. And if you had put in your FY23 data already without including CMF transactions, please reach out and we'll work with you on any changes necessary. We're adding a pick list item in the FA program type variable in the TLR so that folks can indicate that this is indeed a CMF transaction. The inclusion of those transactions in your sort of FA TLR does not mean you don't have to report on them for those particular programs. You'll continue to report on them for those particular programs. You'll just also tell us a little bit about them in the TLR. And another new thing that folks may have noticed is that we have new reports built out to capture data on financial services and on loan purchases. Not every CDFI is going to fill out those data objects. CDFIs that don't make loan purchases will have to fill out the loan purchase object. And financial services is probably best learned about with our certification team, but it's a new TLR-like object that has been built out to capture data on financial services as part of a CDFI's certification application if they're choosing to use those as part of their application. So I see questions coming in the chat. We will try to do questions orally at first at the end of this presentation, but do know we will keep an eye on what's in the chat as well. So, but we'll get to those at the end. So please hold your questions to raise your hand at the end of the presentation. Thank you. I wanted to flag also that there are some technical and display changes to how the TLR data is going to come into our system from your end and how it's going to get certified and marked as final. One change that's going to seem significant for folks who maybe used to report their TLR data manually, sort of one loan by one loan. There used to be an ability to certify each transaction one at a time. Now, because we have a lot of different types of TLR data in the system, we have these new objects. We moved in the direction of having one button to certify all sort of TLR transaction level records. So that new button is located on our TLR import export certify page, which is where you find all of the download templates, and it's indicated in our guidance materials. But you would go there to certify all your transactions rather than certifying them one by one. So that's a change to keep in mind for this year. If you go in and certify after adding one transaction, you're going to run up against a limitation that's going to prevent you from certifying the rest of your transactions. So go ahead and add all that transaction level data in there before certifying. And when you hit that certify button, it will certify across all of the products where you've entered data. So if you had financial services, it's going to certify those. If you had loan purchases, it's going to certify those. It's going to certify any consumer loans in the consumer loan template and any TLR transactions. There's also a few changes to where different buttons are located in manual submission. Again, it's going to be in our guidance. But if you can't find anything and you get stuck, please just reach out by service request and we'll give you a quick answer as to where things are located there. Particularly like adding a new, address record and things like that. So please reach out if any of that is confusing. And we also wanted to flag that you'll see on the TLR import export certify page that there's a new thing there called the target market calculator. And that's being used as part of your certification application. You can read all about that in our certification team's materials and presentation. But that's a new thing that interfaces with your TLR data. And, once you put your TLR data in for this year, you can even run that calculator prior to certifying your data. So you could go in and run that calculator on FY23 data and see what it's picking up and see what it's presenting before you ultimately go in and certify your data. And so if you were to kind of add your data, check out the target market calculator results. And if you had any questions or something didn't make sense, you could always reach out via service request at that point before certifying your data. Seasoned folks on the TLR will know that once you certify your TLR data, you can't go back and edit it without reaching out to one of us at the fund and involving our IT team. So, if anything's in flux about things that you're trying to designate, so for example, you could designate a transaction as one of potential many target markets you're thinking about proposing, you would want to really have done that work before putting in your TLR data and certifying it. Because once you certify it, it's just going to be harder to make that change. Certified data is considered final data in our system. So if you want to see how that target market calculator looks, you're welcome to run that before your data is certified, which would make it easier on your end to make any necessary changes. So this call is not primarily focused on ERP. ERP recipients will receive necessary guidance, going forward on anything specific to that program. But we did want to flag some elements that were released in our FAQ for ERP recipients. And one of those elements is that if your CDFI received an ERP award, you're going to need to include any ERP transactions originated in FY23 in your FY23 TLR submission. So if you're intending to count any of those transactions toward ERP, you would want to put them in your TLR reporting along with any of your other 2023 transactions, because the TLR is about sort of your full annual transaction volume. And all ERP folks are going to be using the full length TLR. So even if ERP is your only award that you have with us, you would use the full length TLR for your 2023 submission. And so you wouldn't use that abbreviated TLR. The abbreviated TLR is going to be reserved for folks who are not under an active, FA, RRP, ERP assistance agreement. And so either TLR would get pulled into the certification application, but everyone's only going to submit one. So if you're an ERP recipient, make sure you're doing the full length TLR, the same as if you're an RRP recipient with an active assistance agreement and an FA, NACA or CDFI FA recipient with an active assistance agreement to tell us about your 2023 transactions. And just another thing on those ERP transactions, CDFIs will add any ERP transactions now, and there's an FA program type variable to designate that if you're filling out the TLR. And at a later date, we anticipate sort of following up with ERP awardees to solicit additional data points on those ERP transactions. So recipients should be aware that any 2023 transactions tagged as ERP, as well as any other transactions supported by ERP and reported in ERP compliance reports, will require additional demographic data points that will be solicited by the fund in subsequent reporting. We're not able to release a lot more information on that at this time, but you're welcome to put in questions, and those may be questions we could include in future FAQ updates or things like that. And then we generally wanted to just add some FAQs and reminders here about the transaction level reporting submissions for FA, RRP, and ERP folks before opening up to questions. Again, we have standard FAQ documents that will update periodically with new questions that come in, but these are just some things we wanted to flag today for more information. I was going to let Alicia join in for the first set of FAQs we wanted to provide today. Alicia?
Okay, so currently there are no category for the small dollar loan program transactions in the FA program type variable in the TLR. So you will need to use the FA tag for any SDLP transactions that you may have. And also the CMF final product and select new market tax credit transactions need to be included in the TLR submissions going forward. Users are only allowed one bulk certification within a period. If you have certified your TLR records already via bulk certification, but want to certify additional records, you will need to submit a service request in AMIS for additional assistance. And after certifying your records, you need to check the status of your reporting schedule in AMIS to verify the TLR task is displaying as complete.
Perfect. Thank you, Alicia. Those are great. And I would really want to stress that one certification action. So we know that there are some new things this year. So just keep in mind, you want your data to be final when you're ready to submit it. If you want to check how your TLR data looks before you certify it, you can do that. We have some custom report links that are built out. You can go in your AMIS record from clicking on the organization tab way at the bottom of that page. There's some links that will show your TLR data. If you can't find them and you want to reach out to us and ask, how do I view my TLR data that's in the system before I certify? We're here, we're happy to help. But if you go and certify, you won't be able to make any changes on your own without reaching out to us again. And also just to keep in mind, this comes up every year where folks have to make later changes to their TLR data submissions, but as a reminder, the TLR is really supposed to be collecting sort of a total annual lending volume from your CDFI in a given year, with a few exceptions on certain types of new markets records and things like that. But it really needs to be thought of as total annual lending volume. We're not talking about loans that were funded, only loans that were funded with CDFI fund dollars, right? So really try to keep that in mind as you do your submission, and particularly as the TLR data is being used for the certification application. We're really looking at your total lending volume. We're not just curious about only the loans that you chose to fund with CDFI fund award dollars. In addition, our data system, in attempts to kind of make sure everyone's actually submitted their full data before certifying, has some rules and validations, particularly around how regulated entities submit data. And so regulated entities, banks, credit unions, are able to submit consumer loan data in a more aggregated format. So at the census tract level, and they submit any other transaction level data at the loan level via what we're now calling the full length TLR. If a regulated financial institution only has consumer loans, as we define consumer loans, or only has, something like mortgage loans and small business loans, that means they're only going to have one out of these two reports. They're only going to have a consumer loan report, CLR, or they're only going to have a transaction level report, TLR. If that is the case for your financial institution, our system is going to sort of generate an error and say, hey, you only have one of these two reports. And you're going to have to reach out to us via service request for us to certify that data on your behalf. So go ahead and do that. If you want to reach out ahead of time, because that's already true for your organization, you can put in that service request as soon as you like. But we'll then pass that on to our IT team, who will go in and certify those transactions on your behalf. That's just a limitation with how we're choosing to collect the data right now. And also, there are cases under our award programs where the entity that received the award and ultimately has the reporting schedule is not the entity that is ultimately submitting the TLR data. So if that situation applies to you, maybe the bank holding company received one of our awards and is carrying out that award through a subsidiary. The subsidiary may put in that TLR data. There's no change there to how that's been happening. But if you're putting in TLR data under the entity that didn't receive the award, the reporting schedule is not going to update automatically. So that would be another situation where you would put in a service request with really simple language that just acknowledges I'm, carrying out the award under this bank holding company that ultimately received the award, and asks that the reporting schedule be updated in that case. Again, the entity that's submitting the TLR data is the entity that ultimately originated the transactions. So there's no change to that historically. And also awardees that in the past, there were always a few situations every year where an awardee would reach out and they would say, I didn't make any transactions this year. Could you please update my reporting schedule to show as not applicable for this year for the TLR? And because otherwise the reporting schedule would show overdue up until it sees some certified TLR data for the year. So if an entity made no loans in a fiscal year and is trying to input the TLR, you should still reach out to us, but also note that the certification application use of the TLR data makes that a little bit tricky, because there won't be any data for it to run on, and so it won't work. So please reach out if that's a situation that your CDFI is in. But I would remind everybody, again, we're not just worried about loans that are financed with CDFI fund dollars. We're talking about all loans and investments that qualify as financial products that your CDFI made in the relevant reporting year. A couple other things. Just really wanted to drill down the fact that what we're talking about here for awardees and their TLR reporting obligations is what we're now calling as the full length TLR. It's very similar to the TLR that was submitted before. It has the jobs numbers, the square footage variables, all of those things. But also to make sure it's clear that that's the same TLR that's going to be used to assess target market activity for your revised certification or recertification application. Awardees are not going to be submitting an abbreviated TLR. Awardees who have a TLR due in 2023 as part of their award requirements, or ERP awardees, are going to do the full-length TLR. There's no second abbreviated TLR that comes in for the same year. You all are going to be full-length TLR cases if you're one of these awardees that we've described. So please keep that in mind and reach out if it is confusing or unclear. We have that field in your full-length TLR called designated target market type. And we have added new fields in the CLR target market type data that will allow you to describe the different target markets that apply to your transactions. So please reach out if any of that is confusing, or if we can clarify anything specific to your CDFI and their situation. Again, please also keep in mind your TLR submission deadlines. We know there are other deadlines floating around, but if you feel that you are struggling to meet your TLR submission deadline because of a technical challenge or otherwise, please reach out via service request, and we'll route that to your compliance portfolio manager if you are trying to request an extension. And again, as always, please reach out via service request for help with any questions. We are here to assist. We appreciate all of your patience with this process, and we're really looking forward to seeing the new data variables, seeing the new data come in, and the new uses of the TLR data. And so we appreciate all of your work that you all are doing to update and to submit that data. All right, at this point, unless anyone else at the CDFI Fund wants to jump in with any more information, I was going to open the call up to questions and ask folks to please use the raise your hand function in the Zoom call to pose a question, and we'll call on you individually. If we're starting to run out of time, we'll make sure everyone puts their questions in the chat so that we can include them, in FAQs or follow up and make sure that they are on our radar as well at the fund. So thank you all again for your patience. Thanks for joining, and we'll open up the floor to questions. Hold on just one moment as I pivot over to view the raised hands. Thank you. All right, first question, Jerry Byers, could you please unmute and pose your question? All right, Jerry, I've allowed you to raise your question. Apologies, I had to add you with that permission. You may go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Can hear you perfectly, thank you.
Okay, I needed clarity on something I heard pretty fast, and that was around SDLP, and whether that needed to be reported as FA since there wasn't an SDLP choice. That's for all loans that we're going to count in meeting our loan volume for SDLP, because the money we got was mostly for loan loss reserves. But I just wanted to clarify, loans we're going to count as SDLP should be reported as FA.
Jerry, thanks. Great question. Hold on one moment, and I'll pull in a response. So yes, for SDLP right now, we don't have a separate SDLP pick list option. If that changes, guidance will be updated accordingly. But right now, it's fine to put that in as FA for FA program type. Does that answer your question? You have any follow-up?
I guess, is it required is my question.
So
because
yeah,
our
great.
first we're almost done. In fact, I thought we were done. But it did not put SDLP as FA. So is that a requirement or is that something we can do?
So let me see if I can answer this properly. And other folks are welcome to chime in from the fund as well. So the TLR is going to need to see all of your financial product originations. And SDLP originations or loans that you're counting towards SDLP, if they count as financial products, they would need to be included in the TLR. If you funded loan loss reserves with SDLP dollars, and that's not like a loan itself or, you know, sort of transaction in the TLR reporting financial product type definition, then you wouldn't need to like include the fact that you put dollars toward loan loss reserves. But you would need to include any loan activities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, all of our loans are in the report.
Okay, great.
The question is, we basically left it either blank or we put ERP down for the loans we're applying towards ERP.
Mhm.
Do we need to put FA in instead of leaving it blank for the loans that we're going to count as SDLP loans? All of our loans are in the file.
Great. And is your TLR already submitted for this year, or is it pending submission?
I have not certified it. We're working with a consulting firm. I think it's been loaded, but not certified yet. So,
Okay. I'm gonna take a look. Normally, we would require a variable entry for FA program type. Going forward, we may add a not applicable type option, but we don't. But currently, today, what's in there would sort of require you to put FA and not leave it blank in order to be able to certify. But I'll double check in your case and take a look at the data that's in there. And I can follow up.
okay,
with the
I'll
program.
double check as well, but thank
Okay.
you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Great question. All right, I'm welcoming Marianne. Marianne, you now have the ability to unmute.
Okay, thank you for taking my question. It has to do with CMF transactions. And in prior webinars, we were instructed to use the TLR template that's labeled in Amos as a 2020 version. I just want to clarify, I don't believe the CMF is part of that pick list. So are we just supposed to make that notation in that appropriate column for data and it will go through with the upload? Or is there another step that we need to complete?
Great question, Marianne. Thanks for raising it. So right now, both Alicia and I and others at the fund have a bunch of service requests from folks in similar positions who are looking to add CMF data. So thank you, one, for recognizing you need to add the CMF data. And we have been building that out internally in the system. It should be likely completed this week. So we would reach out to any existing service requests we have on this, letting you all know, hey, the variable has been added. But I would say double check, in the next couple of days, you should see that CMF item added as an eligible pick list. So you will then be able to tag those loans as CMF transactions in the TLR. And you're welcome to put in a service request so that you get notified as soon as that is available, and we'll make sure to notify anybody.
Okay, thank you. Can I add one more other question?
Sure.
Is there a necessary sequence for the submission? The CDFI that I work for will not need to submit any consumer loan or loan purchase or financial services. Our TLR will be specific to project data and address data. Is there a necessary sequence in which that upload needs to occur?
Excellent question, Marianne. You're going to win the award for best questions.
Yeah.
It's a great question. So in terms of sequencing your TLR data, if you are an organization that will fill out, what we're calling the full length TLR, meaning you have mortgages and business loans to report, or you're an unregulated awardee, you want to just make sure you do the TLR data component first before the address component, to link up those records. So, but in your case, since you don't have any of the other products, I would just say add your TLR transaction file if you're doing the bulk upload first, or enter your sort of TLR data points first, and then go and add the address data points. Those will be linked up on the back end based on originator transaction ID. And so they're going to look to find an existing record that has that originator transaction ID to be able to link up to it. So that would be the sequence I would advise. And for anybody else, there is no order sequence. You know, if you are a CDFI that's inputting data under the other products, there's no problem if you put financial services in first or CLR in first or anything like that. The only thing I would say is if you're doing the TLR, just put those sort of non-address data points in first. That kind of creates the transaction level record, and then go in and add the address data points after. I will say, you know, we do have a geocoding object at the CDFI fund for your TLR data. And so, you know, CDFIs who submit various types of TLR data oftentimes want to come up with the FIPS codes first before they add in that data. You know, if you're working on the CLR template, that's reported at the FIPS code level. So you're gonna need a FIPS code for every row. And if you submit the TLR and you make loans to individuals, we collect FIPS code. So if you do the TLR, you make mortgages, we only want the FIPS code. We don't want coordinates or addresses in those cases. And so I guess I would, you know, if you need to obtain FIPS codes for your transactions as part of your reporting, it's also totally fine to do that geocoding exercise first. So you can go ahead and put in any addresses or coordinates that you need to geocode to a FIPS code, run that service, it'll export the FIPS codes for you. And then you have those ready for when you're importing your TLR data if you're an organization that needs to provide those FIPS codes. So that would be another thing that you're totally able to do first. We recognize not everyone uses our geocoding services, and sometimes people use other vendor geocoding services. Does that answer your question, Marianne?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. All right, Marianne, can I ask you to lower your hand if that ends your questions? And I've invited Dan Sloan into the speaker chat.
Hi there, thank you. You know, my question just has to do with what you were mentioning about the transactions that will be used for ERP compliance. So I know that we're supposed to use the 2010, you know, census tracked vintage, or I think that's the right term, but for those transactions. My question is whether that will cause any issues as far as counting those loans toward, you know, an investment area target market, which you know, would use, I guess, the more recent 2020 census tracks. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense as a question. Thanks for raising it. I'm just seeing if anyone else on the team is going to want to chime in on this question. So hold tight for 1 second.
Sure thing. Thank you.
All right, Dan, this one, I'm going to wait to answer this question for this call to make sure we get a clear answer from all the other teams. It may be already addressed in the FAQs.
Gotcha.
But we'll reach out. We'll make sure it's clear in our guidance that's on our relevant materials. And you're also welcome to put in a service request if this question applies to you. Let me see if someone else might chime in here, but we may not be able to answer that today. But do know that it's a known question, and please put in a service request too, so that we can make sure we get the answer to you as soon as we have it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, I've invited Sylvia to the speaker chat.
Thank you. My question was, and with CDFI, we only do this once a year with TLR, but I didn't see the information needed for a census tract, which I believe is the FIPS code that you were referring to. That's on the second level of entry points versus the TLR like reporting screen that we do as a manual input.
That's correct. And so the address level data points, exactly, you can think of them as sort of like a second stage data entry for each transaction. So if you're doing manual submission, once you create a TLR record and you save it, you're going to be able to add an address record onto that. I may be able to demo that in this call. But yes, that's correct. And that's where you would find that census tract variable. And you'll also see a new variable that we have called census tract vintage year, which would allow you to select 2010 or 2020 for the vintage year for the transaction. But yes, basically you're going to create that TLR record. You're going to then see it exists in the system. And then there's going to be sort of like in the upper right hand side of the page, there's going to be a little arrow to drop down, and it's going to allow you to say new TLR address. And that address is going to be linked to that transaction once you create it and save it. And, folks can add more than one address to a TLR transaction record. So if you had a transaction that, was a type of transaction that actually had multiple addresses, you're not limited to only adding one address record to that. You can create multiple. But yes, it's that kind of second level stage process is a nice way to think about it. If you go in there and you can't find that little arrow, definitely feel free to reach out by service request. I may be able to show it on this call.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I have now invited Kathy to the speaker chat.
I have a couple questions. One is around including a potential new target market. Right now we have investment area. We're considering adding another target population. And I was just curious about, do we need to then fill in all of the data that goes with all of the OTP fields that goes with having an OTP? So like the other targeted populations and description of other targeted populations, and then the things around end users, et cetera, or do we just need to indicate in the designated target market type that we're doing and what OTP we're projecting or proposing, I should say?
Hey, Kathy, great question. I'm going to see if I can route this. Hold tight for just 1 second. All right, Kathy, we think we have an answer, but could you just go ahead and repeat that question one more time?
Sure. We are thinking about adding a new target market. We have an investment area, but we're thinking of adding an OTP. And so I was curious if we are planning to add an OTP, if we just need to mark transactions as with that designated target market type, or if then we need to fill in all of the OTP fields that exist in the TLR. We usually don't do those because we don't have that, but there's the other targeted populations, the description of other approved, the OTP end users. And so we're not sure if we need to fill in those or just say this other target market, African-American, as the designated target market type.
Hi there. I'm gonna pop in and just try to I'm Mitchell Ertel. I'm from the Office of Certification Policy and Evaluation,
Mm-hmm.
how we've designed our supplemental guidance as it relates to the CDFI certification application details that the TLR submitted in connection with that application should reflect the proposed target market components of your entity. However, we understand that there is entities that might be in your situation might have approved target market components from their current CDFI certification that they need to present in connection to an award or funding compliance. So what I recommend, until we finalize and make clear our procedures on how entities should do this, please, I would recommend submitting a service request, and we can kind of learn more about the context in your situation and then give you more specified guidance. I know
Okay,
that might not be the best answer that you wanted to hear, but yeah, just
I think I'm just concerned about the timing. That's all. Like how
I
long
understand.
before. But if you think that somebody can answer that in a service
Yeah,
request,
you're not the only one. And this just yeah, you're not the only one, and I'm aware of the timing. I would just recommend doing that. And if you want to also email our certification email box or help desk email box, I would recommend doing that too.
okay. Can I ask another question that has to do with the fees? And that's probably not you, sir. I don't know, but
Sure. One second, Kathy. I'm gonna also ask Shannon McKay said she might want to chime in on that. She's the head of our
okay.
financial strategies and research team.
Yeah, hi Kathy. So following up on Mitchell's part is more on the STRDAP and the proposed fields. Within the full-length TLR, you can specify the designated target market type data field is not connected to the OTP end user questions or the IA end user questions. So if you don't have that information, because as you said, it's new and you haven't pulled it on a transaction, you can leave those fields still blank and select that proposed target market type
Okay.
of if you're doing your OTP AA, if that's where you're going. So there's not a validation right now in here where Amos is looking to see if you pick this, that these other fields line up. They should eventually line up once you get that final, if it gets approved. If you become recertified and it gets approved, then we would potentially be looking for those. But right now, when it's a proposed situation, it's okay to have left those blank.
Okay, all right. That is actually what I was looking for, because we don't necessarily collect that information because it's never been necessary for our target market. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, but it would be important though, Kathy, to know how you are going to be able to make that designation of that transaction, which would go to your target market assessment methodologies.
Yeah, okay, understood.
So that you are able to then prove if there was a site visit or desk review done on your entity, that you do have the evidence to back up that tagging of those transactions.
Okay, all right. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And then Kathy, you have a question on the fees data point. Is that correct?
Yes, please. I was just wondering, we have multiple different types of fees that we charge at origination, but I'm not quite sure if they all count as origination fees. Like there are some in the guidance, there's a couple examples, but for instance, like if we have inspection fees or legal fees that go through us, they aren't necessarily our fees personally. Are we supposed to include those?
Great question. So I'm gonna just move us over to let's see if I can do this properly. Our data point guidance, just for everyone's sake to see what that looks like in case that's new for you. So with a question like this, it's always great to check out what we do have in the data point guidance. And oftentimes there might be something particular to your CDFI that is not captured in the definition we provide here or in our FAQs. So this here, would be the definition we have for origination fees. Maybe as you're pointing out, it could be a little bit vague. So right now, our definition here is total loan origination fees, including processing, credit report, other fees that borrowers have to either directly or indirectly pay at origination. So points get reported in a separate variable, so those are not included here. If you feel that this is not clear and you sort of have a more specific question about a particular type of fee that's unique to you, definitely go ahead and throw that in a service request, and we'll get back to you with guidance on how to report it, and it may be something we can help use to clarify for other CDFIs in a similar position going forward.
Okay, could you just be directly or indirectly? I think that's where I was trying to understand if that meant directly were like our fees for processing it, and indirectly was like the money that we're collecting to pay for the inspection that they have to have in order to close. Is that what the directly and indirectly means?
That's an excellent question.
Does that have to go through a service request?
That, I mean, it's on my radar now, which is great for us to clarify. You know, usually with those types of things, we would kind of specify it if it seemed like it would help. So to specify whether an inspection should always be included here. So that's going to be something I'll probably have to route to some other teams to see what their guidance is on it beyond what's in here. So I'll be looking into it. But if you want to put in a service request so that we get the answer to you as soon as we have it, I would go ahead and do that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. All right, Kathy, I'm gonna have you lower your hand if that's all right. If you don't have any more questions for now, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna invite Peter into this chat. Okay.
Hi, thank you. We submitted our fiscal year 23 TLR in December 2023. That was our final year for reporting on our awards. So it was a full-length TLR. And this year, obviously, we want to apply for certification, but under OTP, people with disabilities or persons with disabilities, not what we're currently certified for, which is LITP. However, the TLR that we submitted shows a majority of loans as LITP, even though virtually all of our loans are also intersect with OTP PWD. So one, I guess, do we need to contact IT through service request and revise the TLR so that our designated target market type does in fact show a majority of OTP PWD before we submit, well, before we start the certification reapplication, and we're under the normal or regular calendar, whatever the regular deadline. We're not in the early cohort. Does that make sense? So do we need to redo our TLR to recategorize designated target market type? Because I showed a majority LITP, even though they can also be considered OTP PWD, because I think we need to show at least 60% OTP PWD if we're applying for that in our certification application. I think I went in circles. Does that make sense?
I'm going to pop in just because I think I might be able to provide a little bit of clarity. So I'm going to kind of make it a little bit more general. So maybe groups that are also on the call or participants that are also on the call could listen to the context that you provided and then apply it to their own situations. From what it sounds like, your entity is a currently certified CDFI. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, cool. What it sounds like, your entity is currently certified as a CDFI, and it's approved to serve, or it's approved for target market components under its current certification. However, under its recertification with the revised CDFI certification policies, you're intending to propose additional target market components that are not currently approved for your entity yet. So you're asking because you've looked at your TLR data from the TLR that you're probably going to use for the in connection to the CDFI certification application, and you're noticing that the transaction data that's displayed in that TLR is not including some of the target market components that you're intending to propose in the recertification. Am I understanding that correctly too?
Yes, although we are planning on certifying solely under OTP
Okay.
PWD.
So yeah, that's still yep, I'm still following. So
Okay.
here's what I recommend. There's two situations at hand here. One of them is the fact that you've submitted your I'm sorry, excuse me, wrong terminology there. You've certified your TLR using an analysis based off of your currently approved target market components rather than the proposed target market components. And that particular TLR is going to be relevant for the CDFI certification application. So we're having internal discussions on how entities should proceed when this type of dynamic is at play. Your group is not the only group that is in this situation. So what I recommend you doing here is submitting a service request specifically detailing the group that you're affiliated with and the context that is surrounding the change that you're trying to initiate basically with the TLR. And that's going to help us proceed with the next steps for you guys. And then the next component of this is it may not be clear based off of your award compliance as well as your recertification attempt on what target markets your entity should be using to assess its financial product activity as reported on in the TLR, and how to use the target market designation point the target market designation type to convey what entity or what transactions are target market directed. So that's a little bit unclear in our guidance. We're making updates to it right now. So once that will be public soon, and it'll be a clearer explanation of what groups should do in your situation. However, since there is a pressure and sometimes an anxiety around the compliance aspect of the submission dates, I recommend you submitting a service request about that issue separately, so that way we can give you more individualized guidance on how to proceed. Now, I kind of got a little bit convoluted in the last one. Do you have any questions based off of what I just said?
So possibly. So I'm submitting two requests. The first one is detailing the group that I'm a part of and the context surrounding our particular kind of goal. And you mentioned a second one around, I guess, kind of the, making sure we're compliant with the past awards that we've had, and the TLR that we did submit in December 2023 was our last, based on the awards that we had, our last TLR requirement under the award. So that's why otherwise we would have done an abbreviated TLR. So I know I'm at least submitting one service request. That's where I'm at. Yeah.
I'll pop in because I'm happy I checked for understanding, because that's where I was like reflecting on maybe I wasn't as clear. So both of these issues are connected, but they're a little separate. One is the fact that you have already certified your TLR, and that particular TLR is going to be used in connection with the recertification application. So if you intend to try to make any changes or anything related to that, that's a whole different process that we'll have to finalize and give you guidance on. So that's one reason why you'd reach out. And then the other reason is that it's been made clear to us that stakeholders are not certain on which target market components they should be using to assess their transactions within their application connected TLR, especially when they have to certify a TLR because of award compliance. Because of that uncertainty, that's another reason for you to reach out. And you can actually put both of them into the same service request because the issues are kind of linked together. And then we'll provide provide you individualized guidance. And then I think what made it my response originally a little bit more convoluted is I was explaining that we are also making this guidance public at a later date. So if you're listening on the call and you're like, well, why is this particular applicant getting individualized guidance? This same guidance will be publicized at a later date. It's just still we're still finalizing our procedures on how to move forward with this. There's just some anxiety for groups that have to certify TLRs by June 30th, as well as having that TLR connected to their CDFI certification application. So at that, I hope that was clear enough. I know my colleague Mike wanted to mention something.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Mike Snacky from the OCP CERT team. I just wanted to add a couple things to note here and make them generalized for everybody listening in on the call. The first thing that's important to note is to meet the 60% threshold, you don't need like a minimum number of transactions in any one group. You could meet 60% threshold for counts and amounts by using one group, or you could meet it by using 10 groups. It's really the aggregate that matters, and all those numbers in each of those groups are going to add up to be your 60% or possibly under 60%. So that's my first thing I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to mention is when it comes to proposing your target markets, it's really critically important to remember that you can add your designated target markets, but those designated target markets, when it comes to certification purposes, need to have accountability on your board or boards when you propose your application. So it's really critically important to look at the supplemental guidance and determine whether or not you are going to have proper accountability, because there could be an instance where you do your TLR is showing you to be 100% dedicated to hitting certain target markets, but then whoever's reviewing your application could look and see that you don't have accountability to those target markets, and you could go all the way down to 0. So that's the first thing that I wanted to mention when it comes to designated target market on the TLR. The second thing is it's also really, really important to look at the target market assessment methodologies and make sure that you're using proper assessment methodologies when it comes to your transactions, because that's going to be presented in your application. And if you're using improper assessment methodology, then you could also run into the situation where your transactions are not going to count and you could possibly fall out of meeting threshold.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Mike and Mitchell. And just to add on to you from the financial strategies and research side, guidance, we're trying to get guidance out on this as fast as possible. But in a general sense, during this current period where we have currently certified CDFIs applying for certification under the revised application, the use of the TLR for compliance with like award PG&Ms is a little bit secondary to its use for assessing target market activity, if that makes sense. So yeah, if you are like this CDFI, if you are someone who's already submitted and certified your 2023 data and you realize, oh, I didn't really understand what I was doing with that designated target market variable, or the guidance didn't seem clear to me to help me understand what to do, just go ahead and initiate a service request right now. We'll start the conversation. If ultimately it's decided that we do need to change your data, that's a process that we can do. For folks who have upcoming deadlines for submission and sufficient time to pick the right values, we don't want to be going back and changing things, and we may or may not allow changes at certain points. But if you're someone who's already submitted certified 2023 data and you have concerns about that and how it relates to your upcoming application, just go ahead and initiate that conversation with us by service request, and we'll be in touch while the supplemental guidance is also getting released.
Thanks, will do.
Thank you. Okay, inviting Elda to the leader chat.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, your volume's a little low, but we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I just have, I guess, a quick question. So we are an emerging CDFI, and we have received TA grants before, so we are required to submit a TLR. According to the last Zoom, we're supposed to submit the new abbreviated TLR and the new CDFI TLR address. I just want to make sure that's correct.
Great. So to clarify, you're a CDFI whose only awards from us are technical assistance awards.
Well, we're not certified yet. We are applying for a certification.
Okay, great. So in that case, if I understand correctly, if you don't have an FA award with us or RRP or ERP, you would be in the group that's submitting an abbreviated TLR this year. And that TLR, it's like a shortened version of the TLR that a lot of the folks on this call will be submitting. So it has a lot of loan level data points, but it has fewer variables than the variables you'd have to report on if you were under one of those award programs. So that would be correct. If you're an unregulated institution in that boat, you don't have FA, RRP, ERP awards with active assistance agreements, you would put in an abbreviated TLR this year. And so if you're unregulated, it's going to be abbreviated TLR plus the associated addresses. And then if you make any loan purchases, you would add those in via the loan purchase object. Can you confirm that you are calling from an unregulated CDFI, like not a bank or credit union?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess my question there too, but if we only provide consumer loans, we don't have any business loans or anything like that. So when I try to submit it online through manually, it's asking for business loans information, and I get a little confused there. So I was thinking about submitting the template instead.
Okay. So you could definitely reach out if something about the validations is confusing or you're not able to navigate it. If you're only originating consumer loans, and you're a loan fund or an unregulated entity, we would have you submit those via the TLR records. So the consumer loan report is reserved only for like banks and credit unions, regulated entities. So you would put them in the TLR, in the abbreviated TLR. You would select consumer for the loan purpose variable. And once you select that, it should be only showing you the fields that we require for consumer loans. So it should sort of stop showing you the ones that would be triggered if it's a business loan. So I would say if you're doing the manual entry method and you're reporting on consumer loans, just double check that you've selected consumer as the purpose for that. And it should sort of activate only those variables we want to collect for those consumer loans. But if at any point you get stuck and you can't save a record, just take a screenshot of that, add it to your service request, and we'll take a look. But from my understanding of the information you described, you'd be doing an abbreviated TLR and you'd be putting those consumer loans in the abbreviated TLR, whether you do sort of a bulk upload or a manual upload, the errors and validations should essentially work the same. But definitely reach out if you're stuck and we'll be happy to take a look.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course, thank you. All right, inviting Shannon to the chat.
Hi, thank you. I have two questions. The first is we have a handful of consumer loans that do not have addresses that can be geocoded. They're usually PO boxes in that case. And so because the consumer loan object asks us to aggregate by FIPS codes, I'm wondering how we include those. And then my second question is whether consumer loans, like actually consumer loans in the industry sense, can have a purpose, climate purpose, or if those climate purpose should always be reserved for business loans.
Great question. Give me 1 second, see if I can pull together some resources from the guidance on this, because this question does come up a fair amount. Okay, so presently in the full-length TLR, you'll see in terms of the loan purpose pick list items, you'll see that climate is sort of a separate pick list item, right? It's like you can pick either business or climate, but unlike in the abbreviated TLR, where right now we allow you to sort of pick business as the purpose and indicate yes or no whether it has a climate-centered purpose. For various reasons, that is not working in the same way in the full-length TLR, in part because of how PRA stuff went out and approval. So, so we recognize that right now that's a little bit difficult for folks to answer because it's sort of is an or question, right? You pick either microloan or climate, or you pick either, home purchase or climate, but not both. So I believe there are folks working on guidance on this if it hasn't come out yet. But right now it's an allowable entry. And so right now, you would have the choice to designate a loan as climate-centered finance or business, in how you report that in the TLR. We do provide a definition of what is considered climate-centered finance for the full-length TLR, with some sample NAICS codes and things like that. So if that leads you to think, this,
Right.
yeah, go ahead.
So if I can clarify, so it seems very clear that climate-centered finance can be used for investees who are businesses. My question is more about whether the investee can be an individual. So if someone gets an EV loan, for instance, for their car, that's a consumer loan. And I'm wondering if the climate purpose can apply, because otherwise that loan would fall into the consumer loan object. And so I'm wondering if that climate was really intended to only sort of be for investees who are businesses, or if it's intended also for individual investees.
Great question. So all I could do right now, because I don't have enough people on the call who would be the ultimate authorities on that. All I could do right now on the call is read what's from the guidance for this one. But I do know it's been coming up, and so I do know we could provide you more consistent guidance for some of the answers that have gone out by service request on this question.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, I know I hate to say it, but put in that request and we'll get back to you with a real answer. I totally understand the question. The framing makes complete sense to me. So I can, but in our guidance right now, we say, it leans more towards business and how the description is read because it provides those sample NAICS codes. It says it could be agriculture, forestry, renewable energy, development, electric vehicle innovation or use. So that maybe speaks a little bit to your consumer loan question. That's in the definition right now. But definitely please reach out and we'll provide the most up-to-date clarity that we have.
Okay, that sounds good.
Thank you. And did that fully answer your question? I feel like it was two-tiered.
Yeah, there's the first question was about addresses that can't be geocoded. So we have a handful of consumer loans that have PO boxes, for instance, and they cannot be geocoded. And so I'm wondering how to report those on the consumer loan object because it's aggregated by FIPS codes. And so when we submit that, there's going to be, a few where there is no FIPS code. And so I'm wondering what to do with those.
Great question. I know our team has provided guidance on this before. I'm going to be looking for an answer on that. I would say if you're staying on this call, I can get you an answer in a couple minutes. And if not, put in that service request and I'll get you an answer via service request. I know it's come up before. I know we have guidance. I just don't have it on the top of my head, but you're correct that it won't accept the PO box on its own. And if you don't otherwise have coordinates, that would be challenging to report that transaction. So I know we have guidance. It's going to take me a minute to pull up the official statement for you. But otherwise, if you're going to drop this on this call, reach out and I'll provide it over service request.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay, opening up the floor to Brandy Smith.
Hi, thank you so much. I have a couple of questions. The first is regarding affiliates that may potentially be subject to the collective review. If a CDFI is submitting a TLR for June 30 for performance goals and measures deadlines, but they also have an affiliate that will be subject to the collective review, can the affiliate submit lending activity at a later date, or does it need to be dropped in as of June 30?
May I pop
Great
in?
question. Oh yeah, Mitchell, go ahead. I'll follow up as soon as you're
Brandy,
done.
okay, so I'm so sorry to make you do this. I followed 75% of what you said. Could you please restate it, at least the last part?
Yes, essentially what I'm asking is if a CDFI has a TLR that is due, but they also have an affiliate that will be subject to the collective review, does the affiliate data need to be submitted also by June 30, or can that be submitted at a later date?
Great question. So, and just to clarify, the entity that you're asking, I guess, on behalf of would be the primary entity under review in connection to the collective review process. And that entity is going to submit a recertification application. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Cool. So yes, the TLR that would be due on June 30th would only be in connection to the funding compliance for whichever CDFI fund funding opportunity that that entity took advantage of or participated in. So if your entity is not applying for CDFI recertification during the early recertification opportunity, the entities that would be subject to the collective review process would not need to submit a TLR at that time. The entities that are subject to the collective review process for the primary applicant would just need to submit their TLRs prior to when the actual entity that's applying for recertification is preparing to submit their recertification application. So they wouldn't have to, the related entities would not have to submit their TLRs on the same day as the primary entity under review. Does that answer your question and make sense?
That absolutely answers my question and makes perfect sense. Thank you very much.
Awesome. I'm happy I could help.
Great. My second question has to do with additional types of loans that are, and we now understand are being included for TM calculations for certification, like secondary market mortgage loans, credit card lending, if initially originated and funded by the bank, as well as pools purchase, things like that. Those typically would not have been included in the TLR, would not have been used for satisfying PG&M. Now that they are part of the target market calculation, can they also be used to satisfy a growth objective for performance goals?
Randy, that is a great question. Unfortunately, I think the people who would ultimately answer that are not on this call. That would be something that's probably ultimately determined by Heather, who leads our compliance and reporting team. But we can alert her to the question. I'm sure they're already thinking about it. But it's a great one. I think in general, the changes that we're trying to capture here for the TLR, you can think about them in terms of changes that are being used for certification. So I would certainly not automatically assume that changes anything in regards to sort of like what are eligible activities or anything related to your PG&Ms. Those assistance agreements have not been updated. So you would sort of be under whatever you had agreed to for allowable activities that could count towards those PG&Ms. There are going to be things that are, there could certainly be things that are, you're able to report on in the TLR that maybe for some award program might not be part of the PG&Ms for whatever reason. For example, ERP comes to mind where there's like specific geographies where you're lending in, right? we're going to be capturing lots of data. Some of those are going to be in ERP eligible geographies. Some of those aren't going to be in ERP eligible geographies. So there's going to be a lot that's coming into the TLR that doesn't sort of change what those reporting requirements are, or PG&M standards. But it's a great question to pose, specifically if you think it's sort of relevant to your organization, you think it hasn't been clarified, and our compliance and reporting team would ultimately opine on that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Sure, thank you. Also, thanks everyone for staying on so long. I'm gonna let Stella into the chat.
Hi, I have a quick question that is related to tagging loans under ERP. It might have already been addressed, but I know we're supposed to be tagging loans that we're going to be counting for ERP, but in the guidance it says not to tag any that we completed in like the reporting year 0. So I'm just wondering, but we still would want like to count those later on when we report on year 1. So I'm just making sure that like that will be okay if I just list them as FA, and then later when that year 1 comes out, I list them as ERP, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, Stella, thanks for raising this. So the background here is that the guidance has been ongoing and a little bit in flux. So when some of that initial guidance came out for ERP, it was structured in a way where we anticipated, folks would hold off on reporting ERP transactions in year 0, and they would ultimately sort of save them up and report on them at the end of their year 1 due date. Unfortunately, we can't have you hold on to those ERP transactions and not tell us about them, because in all likelihood, your recertification application wants to look at a full year of transaction volume, right? And so we don't want you to be excluding those ERP loans.
Yep.
Because that could skew how the target market calculator runs. And so ultimately that guidance has been in flux. And so our ERP team released like an FAQ on this a little bit recently. If you don't have it and you want a copy of it, reach out, we'll send it to you.
Okay.
That attempts to sort of explain the change in guidance here. And the change in guidance, even though it's not necessarily in all the live guidance documents right now, it's getting implemented. Please note that the current guidance is not to hold off on your ERP transactions for your FY23 submission and include them in the TLR. We've added ERP as a eligible pick list in the FA program type variable for your TLR. And that's kind of what I put in the slides about there are additional variables that are going to have to be required for ERP transactions that have not gone through PRA, that are not in the TLR right now. And so what we're asking folks to do is, if they want to tag ERP transactions in FY23, they may do so, and they shouldn't exclude them. And we'll be following up at a later date as how we anticipate it, to solicit some extra information on those ERP transactions, sort of once those ERP TLR variables have gone through their various stages of approval. Does that make sense as guidance?
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're kind of saying it doesn't really matter if it was in year 0. We want to show them in any case.
Exactly. So
Yep.
don't hold off on those year 0
Okay.
ERP transactions. Give us a full year of lending for this TLR submission. And so yeah, that kind of initial design of that year 0 element for ERP TLR specifically is sort of gone, because ultimately, for folks who've had a year 0 period before, it's often it's like a partial year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's really hard for us to collect partial year data now from folks when certification is using the TLR. So we, we don't want you to start tagging loans for ERP that were originated before that start of your performance period, right? So we would still want them to follow, like, fall within the sort of total ERP period, but But don't hold them off. Don't pull them out of your submission for this year. Give us a full year of data. Don't just give us year 0, and don't hold off on year 0. I know it's extremely confusing, but that is what you should do at this point.
No, I think that makes sense. And then just kind of like keep an eye out for additional requests regarding those few.
Yep. That's correct.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. All right, I invited another person to the chat under B Distad.
Oh yeah, Brian. Yep, thank you so much. Just 2 quick questions. I hope they're quick. I just wanted to confirm the timeline. So for the submission of the abbreviated TLR. So for background, we're a regulated bank that only has SDLP PG&M, so no FA, ERP, RRP in the system. So in the past, we've submitted the full TLR, but I just wanted to confirm that by June 30th, we won't submit the full TLR, but we will submit the abbreviated TLR with our new application later this fall. Is that a correct statement?
Can you tell me why in the past you submitted a full TLR? Or did you have awards?
We had other awards. So we had FA and yeah, we had FA awards, and then those have timed out, or we've met all the compliance requirements. So this will be the first year that we don't have any FA. We did not get ERP, and RRP has been closed out in our system. So the only current open applications or current PG&Ms we have is SDLP at this time. So my understanding is then we would only submit the abbreviated TLR.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. So if you could just confirm like that your reporting schedules like for the RRP are marked as NA for 2023, then yes, that sounds correct to me. You're welcome to put in a service request to confirm, but that would be the guidance that I would provide. Yeah, that information.
I did check and it was marked NA, and it confused me a little bit because it was the 3rd year. So I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
I believe early closeouts, so long as it's like really fully closed out, would put you in that category. I'll double check and provide guidance if different, but I believe that should be the case.
Yeah, so then we would just submit the abbreviated TLR with the application.
That's correct. And also to note for folks, in case it's not clear too, when you look at those forms, like we're using abbreviated TLR and full length to differentiate here. Technically, the consumer loan template is the same for both. There is no difference between abbreviated TLR consumer loan template and full length TLR consumer loan template. But yes, you could consider yourself an abbreviated TLR case broadly for this year.
Thank you. And then another clarifying question. Now that we're talking, we also have so we are a regulated bank, so we submit the consumer loan templates. And now that there's so background, we purchase loans from a certified CDFI, another unaffiliated third party, but we purchase loans. So now it's introduced the CDFI OTP target market consideration. And I've been told there's some back and forth on whether we report those transactions as one transaction or many transactions. So let's say for background, we purchase one loan pool every month. Is that 12 transactions, or do we report that as 20,000 transactions? I mean, I don't know if guidance has been finalized, and I've heard both ways.
Yeah, great question. I know that some guidance is definitely evolving on this question.
Okay.
I know that whether you can bundle or not bundle, is a question a lot of folks are asking, and there are limitations on bundling if your purchases come from a certified CDFI or not. There's been evolving discussions on whether purchases from CDFIs have to only be called OTP CDFI target market or not, things like that. I would say though, like for a question as specific as this, I would hesitate to give you an answer. but we will give you an answer if you put it in service request. We know, this purchase object is new. It's new for us, and so we recognize some of the definitions aren't clear, or could be made a lot more clear. So I would say, if you don't mind, please reach out via SR for that, and we'll get you the guidance. But yes, you're not wrong that some of that has been evolving, and it makes sense that your read has been a little bit unclear on how to proceed. So yeah, if you can put your specific situation in, and even that sort of detail on, like, okay, I'm purchasing monthly, that would help us understand what guidance to provide.
Okay, great, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.
Yep, you bet.
All right, welcoming Sonia to the chat.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. So I'm trying to understand a little bit better how affiliate entities that don't have their own financial activity should go about launching the certification application, because they won't have their own target market check to run based on TLR data. So just trying to understand that process a little bit better.
Yeah, great question. So this is highly a certification question, but we're gonna let it go. I'm gonna have Mike answer this one likely. I will also put in a plug for OCPE that they do have office hours and conference calls where they do answer a lot of these questions as well. And I'll let them put in a plug for when those next ones are. But Mike, is that one that you're gonna be able to take for us?
Sure. So you're asking if you can use a related entity's financing activity for TLR, correct?
Yeah, the example that comes to mind most often is a depository institution holding company and their affiliate bank.
Sure. I'm going to start off with like the data piece, and then Mitchell, if you have anything to add as it comes to kind of the more regulatory piece, then please feel free to chime in. Basically, whenever a related entity is using another party's transactions, we can query that and see if they're meeting threshold. We can see if they're target markets. It's within the TLR page in TLR Import Export Certify. If you are using the parent, like the holding company, you can go to TLR Import Export Certify and run your target market check, and you'll see zeros for the first single year threshold, and then you'll be able to scroll down a little bit and see affiliate organization threshold. That's going to be all the information that's being pulled in from any and all related entities. It could be one related entity, it could be 100. So that information is all going to be able to be found. There is a hiccup, of course. When you go to submit your certification application for the parent who has no transactions of their own, you need to submit a service request asking us to unlock this functionality for you. It's just something that we have in process right now, but you are able to use related entities transactions. You are able to submit the certification application having no transactions of your own, as long as there are some related entities transactions. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I'd just like to clarify specifically what aspect of what you shared should that holding company or similar affiliate submit a service request for, because you mentioned that at the end.
Sure. Service requests are started for many reasons, but when you are the holding company that has no transactions of your own, you can start the certification application on your own, but you can't submit it without submitting a service request asking us to make your target market threshold yes, so that you can submit your application. And then ultimately the CDFI fund is going to review all the information and make a determination on your application from that information provided by the affiliates.
Okay, so the service request is to be submitted prior to the certification application being submitted, but now you're able to launch the certification application without a target market lending check. Is that correct?
You still have to run a target market lending check. So you're kind of going through the motions here. You go to TLR Import Export Certify, run your target market check. That allows your certification application to be launched. You can fill out all the target market, or you could fill out the entire certification application. but then when you go to submit, you need to create a service request asking the functionality for you to be able to submit to be enabled.
Okay.
So it's okay to have zeros upon launch, but not upon submission, if that makes sense.
Yes, that's a helpful nuance. Thank you very much.
Sure. And with any situations like that too, I would say, you know, with affiliate families and back to kind of like the award TLR reporting, just make sure you're submitting the TLR data under the entity that originated the transaction. Because deviations from that will cause some chaos. And, you know, and certainly, you know, we've had folks say, well, should I put them under both? Like, should I put them under the holding company and under, you know, the subsidiary? And the answer is no, you know, put them under the entity that originated the transactions. Don't have them duplicated anywhere. So yeah, if the holding company ultimately does not originate transactions, then yes, to submit the application, that would be the process.
Thank you very much.
And I wanted to just pop in real quick and just say, well, the process that Mike had articulated is intended to be a process that will be more formalized at a later date. This is just a technical issue with our application at this point. But then I also wanted to respond to what Aaron had mentioned about our CDFI certification conference call schedule. Our next CDFI certification conference call is going to be Thursday, June 20th, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. So if you have any specific CDFI certification inquiries, please join that call.
Great, thanks, Mitchell. All right, Sonia, is that okay for your questions?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, opening up the floor to Nathaniel.
Hello, thank you for taking my question. Just want to start by saying we really appreciate everything you guys are doing on this. It's a lot of work, and we know that you guys have as much going on with the complexity of it as we do, so we appreciate everything you guys are doing. I think a lot of my questions have been cleared up on the things that have been asked so far. But I do want to ask one clarifying question on the relation of the ERP loans tagged in the TLR. I know this has been a popular subject today. If we have loans that were made with ERP funds, but those are consumer loans, there's not really a place on the consumer loan report that I was aware of to tag those loans as ERP. Will that count against us when we get the follow-up reporting? For instance, if we have consumer loans that are ERP that we weren't able to tag in the TLR because of the consumer loan report, can we still include those loans in that follow-up reporting and make sure that they count for us for PG&M purposes?
Hey, Nathaniel, thanks for that question. So agreed that in the consumer loan report right now, there's not a way to tag, you know, hey, this loan, I'm associating it with the ERP program. So confirming that that is correct. No, there shouldn't be any sort of like penalization or inability to sort of associate consumer loan transactions for FY23 to ERP, so long as they meet, you know, the requirements for what could be associated to the ERP program. Sort of the like, and your intuition's right that, like, you know, if I look at somebody's ERP, somebody's consumer loan report, they're an ERP awardee, I can't immediately tell if they counted zero or all of, or if they're intending to count zero or all of those transactions toward the ERP program. At this point, with the caveat that this is not finalized, like we would anticipate, you know, that anything that you were telling us about that you did in other reporting that you do on the ERP program in regards to FY23, about uses of award funds and things like that, that you did with your consumer loans, that you would ultimately at a later time be able to work with us to provide ERP specific data points to capture that that activity. Does that answer your question? I know it's not.
Yeah,
super
it
specific
does.
right now.
It does for the most part. Essentially, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's okay to have consumer loans that were deployed with ERP money. And we won't be missing out on our chance to identify them just because they're consumer loans. Do I understand that?
Yeah, your understanding is definitely correct. Just because there aren't ERP specific data points for those loans in the CLR does not mean you cannot count any consumer loans in FY23 towards ERP. So basically, I would say check out that that FAQ for ERP that was released a little while ago. There's a little bit of maybe more specific language in there that speaks to sort of like, you know, any transactions tagged as ERP in, you know, the full length TLR form, you know, we would want to be able to substantiate with additional data points down the road, as well as any other transactions supported by CDFI ERP and reported in CDFI ERP compliance reports. You know, you would want to make sure you're in a reasonable position to provide demographic data points similar to that which has been described in the ERP guidance on this issue at a later date.
Of course. Thank you so much.
All right, Nathaniel, was that your only question?
If I'm permitted to follow up, I have one.
We could give you one more. We've been letting people have two. But I would encourage everyone else, please put your questions in the chat if you haven't gotten a chance to answer them. So we'll record them and make sure we acknowledge them where we can.
Wonderful. Staying on the ERP loan subject, I think I heard this earlier, but I just want to make sure I was clear. If we have an ERP loan, we want to make sure that loan gets included in the target market calculation. If we're doing our target market on an investment area basis using the 2020 tracks, we are okay to report that loan either in the address report or the consumer loan report as appropriate using a 2020 FIPS for target market purposes, and we'll have the opportunity to follow up and prove later how that loan counted for ERP. Did I understand that right?
I think so. I can't say a definitive yes, but yes, I think you're generally correct that in subsequent follow-up, we would be hoping to obtain sort of any other information on that transaction that would be useful for ERP reporting. But you should certainly not exclude, you know, don't feel like you have to exclude. You certainly shouldn't exclude any loans, you know, in your submission. And yes, but I believe what you're saying is correct. You're welcome to put it in a service request to completely confirm, but I believe what you're saying is correct.
Wonderful, thank you. We just have a number of organization clients that are going to be that have a June 30 deadline, and we just want to make sure that everything is put in a row and lined up properly before we submit on that.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question. All right, maybe I'll just squeeze one more in. I've invited, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, SEUN to the chat. Thank you.
Yes, this is Sean from National Community Investment Fund. I wanted to ask a question about the full length TLR. So we are changing our target market in the new application to investment area. We used to have national CDFI OTP. How do we fill out the full length TLR? I know there's a designated target market portion. I mean, could you kind of walk me through on what to look for? How does that?
Hi, so the designated target market field is going to have allowable pick list values. If you are using the web page, it'll be a drop down and all those values will be displayed. If you are using the template, the CSV file, those will be within the pick list field. I believe it's row 4 within the designated target market column. And any clarification on those groups is going to be within the TLR data point guidance. Does that answer your question?
To some extent, I'm just saying that like it's just the fact that we're changing the we're changing the target market. You know how, because in the past we would have reported the transactions we've done related to our current target market, but now we're changing target market. I'm just curious on how that would affect the certification. And how does that work?
So I'll step in. This is Shannon from Financial Strategies and Research again. So in this case, if you want to add another target market than what you're currently approved for, you can in the TLR tag your transactions for that proposed target market. But then when in your certification application, you'll need to put forth that you are seeking approval for this additional target market, but you'll need to be able to meet then the other requirements tied to a target market approval, which include accountability. And if you cannot show accountability to that new proposed target market, then it's not going to be approved. And then that would then affect any transactions that you have tagged with that proposed new target market, which may then push you down below the 60% target market thresholds that are needed in order to be a certified CDFI.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you. So we are currently at time for our webinar. We appreciate everybody joining in. I know there's a couple more questions we didn't answer. So I hope everyone got those in the chat, but if not, your chance to do that is now. Put them in the chat, we'll record them, hopefully be able to kind of include them going forward with guidance if we feel like it's not clear in the current guidance. And as always, please reach out via service request. If there's anything we need to clarify, look out for those office hours with our certification team as well. If you have certification specific questions, and also just know that we're here to help. We know there's been changes, adjustments. We appreciate everyone's work on this, everyone kind of building knowledge of the guidance beforehand. We can tell people are looking into it, and we appreciate the work that everybody's doing to help us get this right and learn from the process. So thank you all again for tuning in. Thank you for staying so long. I know I ultimately didn't answer someone's PO box question, so please put that in for a service request. We'll get that answered to you. And anybody else who wants to explain maybe a detail that seems really specific to your CDFI that hasn't been answered here or in the guidance. If you have concerns about meeting your 6:30 deadline, as always, you have the right to put in a request for consideration for an extension. We can't guarantee what will be approved, but that is an option that's available to you. So reach out if you're having technical difficulties or things like that. And know that we're here waiting to support you. So thanks again, everybody. Take care. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And best of luck with your upcoming TLR submissions. Again, we're here to help. Thanks again.